Music does have incredible power to rearrange your insides, rearrange your thoughts, heal your body. My mother knew all about this when I was very young. She knew how music was a healing balm. Because whenever I was sick, she'd give me two things. She'd give me medicine for my aches and pains, and she'd give me music for my spirit. So I'd listen to classical music, listen to Mozart, Bach, Beethoven, and it always worked. There have been times when I walked on stage ill, not thinking that I could actually go on and do my performance, and 90 minutes later, walk off stage well. One of the best compliments I think I ever had, ever in my entire career, was a woman standing up in the audience and saying, I feel so good now. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Renee Fleming, your host for the launch of the Sound Health Network. And who better to inspire us today than Bobby McFerrin, one of music's most generous ambassadors. His concerts are a testament to the emotional, spiritual, and physical power of music. I became interested in neuroscience because virtuosic singing requires an exploration of the mind-body connection. In recent years, as artistic advisor to the Kennedy Center, one of my most rewarding missions has been guiding the Sound Health Initiative to new collaborations with the NIH and NEA, bringing more visibility to music and wellness. So I'm delighted to see the Sound Health Network, led by our friends at UCSF, come to life. During today's program, we'll hear from leading voices across the country working at the intersection of music and health. Scientists, therapists, and musicians forming a growing chorus that we hope you'll join as well. So thanks for being with us today. Let's begin in San Francisco with Drs. Charles Lim and Julene Johnson.
Welcome to Sound Heals, the official launch event for the Sound Health Network. I'm Charles Lim.
And I'm Julene Johnson. We're the co-directors of this exciting new network, a partnership to promote public awareness and research into the impact of music on health and wellness.
Our understanding of the importance of music as a form of medicine and the profound impact of music on human brain function has been rapidly expanding in recent years.
Given these challenging times, the healing power of music to both individuals and societies is more important than ever.
For me, music represents the highest form of sound and the pinnacle of hearing, a true masterpiece of human biology. By expressing the full range of emotion, music has provided comfort and connection for people throughout human history.
For me, I became interested in music and health research after observing a woman with Alzheimer's disease suddenly come to life while playing the piano. This inspired me to study music and health for my professional career.
We're certainly not alone in these experiences. More and more, people are asking deeper questions about how and why music affects us the way that it does.
Why does music move us, provoke us, connect us, and at times rehabilitate us?
Why is music so deeply embedded in our memories? Why is it so central to our identities?
To answer these questions, we will create a community of music explorers, scientists, therapists, educators, and others.
The Sound Health Network is a proud partnership between the National Endowment for the Arts and the University of California, San Francisco.
And in collaboration with the National Institutes of Health, the John F. Kennedy Center for Performing Arts, can host for today's program, soprano Renee Fleming.
In the coming months, we look forward to hearing from you and hopefully even collaborating with you.
Please join us as we create greater awareness, community, and continued curiosity about how and why sound heals.
Hey everyone, I'm Dr. Sanjay Gupta, and it is my great pleasure to join all of you and to be reunited with the wonderful Renee Fleming and my old professor, Dr. Francis Collins. It was just over 2 years ago that we all stood together on the stage of the Kennedy Center for this concert that blew my mind. It was showcasing the Sound Health Initiative. Today they're going to be joining forces with Sunil Iyengar, my friend, of the NEA for the launch of the Sound Health Network in partnership with the University of California, San Francisco. It's really going to build upon some of this incredible work to date that's been done by the National Institutes of Health, which Dr. Collins runs, and the Kennedy Center, where Renee is an artistic advisor. During this pandemic time, I think we are more grateful than ever for the beauty and the nourishment of music. I have to tell you, as you guys may have seen 2 years ago, my musical skills are nowhere near what yours are, but I love music no less. I have been doing a lot of these spontaneous music dance parties with my 3 teenage girls. And we dance like no one's looking because no one's looking. That's the nature of a pandemic. But it's so relaxing to hear the music. I remember so many of the things that Dr. Collins taught me about what was happening in the brain when I'm simply listening and even singing along. It makes such a difference for me, I got to tell you honestly, during this COVID time. So with that backdrop and that genuine sort of reflection on music, I'd like to welcome now Miss Renee Fleming, Dr. Francis Collins, and my friend Sunil Yanger. Welcome, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sanjay.
Thank you.
Love being
Sanjay.
here.
Sanjay, I want to take this opportunity to congratulate you on your book, Keep Sharp. Building a brain at any age is something we all need and something I'm definitely looking forward to reading.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. So I guess I'd like to just sort of know for all of you how this has played out for you during the pandemic. And Renee, maybe I can start with you. What has this been like for you? Have you been able to still be as participatory with the music? I'm curious to know if you've ever taken like a busman's holiday where you go listen to other music. And if so, what are you listening to?
First of all, all of us who are in the performing arts have been grounded. We're not working at all, really. If we are, it's typically in a philanthropic way. We're trying to give back. We're trying to share what we can with young artists so they can continue their careers when this is over. And we're also trying to support the institutions that hire us so that they'll be still there at the end. But the thing that I found most extraordinary, especially in the beginning of the pandemic, was this outpouring of a desire to communicate through the arts, whether it was on balconies or out windows, but singing, playing, dancing. It just sort of reminded us that we come to this from an evolutionary standpoint, and it's been with us for as long as we have been human, and I find it so uplifting. So that's been the really good story, but I'm anxious to get back to work like all of my colleagues.
Yeah, no doubt, more than ever. Dr. Collins, I mean, running the NIH in the middle of a pandemic with all the various pressures that must come with. I am curious, your decompression, I know, has been a lot through music. How does it help you? What the process of using music to help de-stress? What do you do?
Well, it sure has been a stressful 12 months, and I've been a hermit in this home office where you see me right now, pretty much 24/7. Right through the wall over there is my baby grand piano, and it's gotten a lot of playing in the course of these months as just a way to stand up when it's just like a little much, and I need to do something to get my head out of the details of the latest stressful data about vaccines or monoclonal antibodies or whatever it is. Other thing I've tried to do is with my own staff, and there are 40,000 people who work at NIH, is in my weekly outreaches to them, sometimes to try to include a bit of a musical part. So it's been there. It's continued to provide for me a source of spiritual uplift at a time where, boy, I could use a lot of that this year. And thank God for music.
Yeah, I hear you. And I imagine a lot of people listening hear that as well. Sunil, I'm curious about your origin story as well with music. And I'll preface by saying, I don't know, we're both Indian and my parents are retired now. They're engineers their whole life and never imagined them really getting into music. And now they sing these Bollywood songs. They're doing karaoke. My dad is learning to play instruments and he's in his late 70s for the first time. It's kind of remarkable, but I'm not trying to lead you, but
No.
Your origin story, how much was it Indian music or other types of music as well?
Well, as a kid, I learned how to play piano and then gave it up promptly at grade eight. And just like my parents warned me, I've grown to regret that ever since. But my parents actually, particularly my mom, she sings a lot. So she must know she knows hundreds of songs often in various Indian genres. And I'll just say that during this time of COVID, when many people bake bread, etc., I've managed to teach myself ukulele through the help of online resources, of course. So that's been a lot of fun, and I inflicted 12th Street Rag onto my colleagues at a recent holiday party.
That's great. Part of the reason I was so excited to join all of you today is that I feel like for a lot of organizations, this COVID time has also been sort of like interrupted time. A lot of the things that people were working on sort of got interrupted, let alone the idea of trying to build new chapters. And yet that's exactly what you're doing. You're embarking on this bright new chapter and your collaboration together. And, I think everyone in this field really applauds your efforts. I wonder if you could have imagined all of this sort of turning into what it did when you first turned up for the dinner at the inn at the Little Washington back in 2015. Because that's where this really sort of began, right? I mean, Renee, I'm wondering, can you just share some of your recollections of that evening?
Well, it was an amazing evening because my husband and I were invited. We didn't know who was going to be there. We knew nothing about this, but I'd heard of the Inn at Little Washington, and I thought, well, let's just go. Let's have an adventure. And it changed my life in a way because I met Dr. Collins there, and it was the day after the marriage equality decision with 3 justices. I was seated between Justices Scalia and Ginsburg, who were both opera lovers. But it was a bit, things were a bit tense, I would say, in the beginning. But Dr. Collins brought his guitar along with him. We had a sing along. Dr. Collins, why don't you tell them what we sang? Because this is such a great story.
Well, I'd never met Renee, and I didn't know who was going to be at this dinner either. And yeah, it was a little tense because Scalia had written this, blistering dissent to the decision. And actually, Justice Kennedy had written the majority view, so he was not real popular with Scalia either. And yeah, you could kind of feel the tension in the air. But music, this is a great example of how music can bring people together. People began to kind of relax. You could see it. Scalia, who'd been kind of grumping around, stood up drinking his brandy and holding his cigar and began to get into it. And so we figured, okay, we got to do something appropriate for the time. What better than the Bob Dylan anthem, "The Times They Are A-Changin'"? And let's get everybody to sing that last line together. And they did. All 3 Supreme Court justices joined together by music at a time where they had not been very together the day before.
That's an incredible story.
Let's try it.
That's an incredible story.
Let's try it with Congress.
Right, I know. We got a few other targets for you now.
Well, the project came about because I asked Dr. Collins why scientists were studying music. It didn't even make sense to me. And I was new at the Kennedy Center, and when he said he was very enthusiastic about the work that's being done, but it needed some more validation and some more rigor. And I said, well, I think that the Kennedy Center would be a great place to provide this platform for science with the audience, with the public. And it's just been like gangbusters. People love it.
And it gave me a chance to stir up interest at NIH. Interest that now has grown to 54 scientists who work at NIH, who are part of our working group that's now designed a research program where we've already spent $20 million supporting research, and we aim to spend more. In fact, anybody who wants to apply, just go to NIH Sound Health, and you'll see what our current open application opportunities are. And now it's great to have as a partner NEA and UC San Francisco in this Sound Health network. Yeah, you're right, Sanjay. This is not one of those years to sort of say, well, we'll just have to put that aside for a while. Let's keep it building.
I'm just curious because people, they're now hearing this story, right, of how this whole thing came together, and you have 54 scientists. How unusual is that? I mean, a world-class soprano, the head of the NIH, get together and launch into a long-term partnership. Does this sort of thing happen, or is this a very rare sort of situation?
I think it's pretty unusual. It takes the exceptional energy and vision of a Renee Fleming. I mean, we had a meeting in the Tabard Inn, I think it was, a couple months after that Inn at Little Washington to brainstorm about what might happen. And Renee was like, out there, let's do this. And I was like, I didn't know anybody else would have that same view. Isn't it like most things? It's relationships. When people from different disciplines get together, and then the sparks fly and something happens that never would have otherwise.
Yeah, I love that there are more than 20 different divisions of the NIH who are somehow involved, and you don't get to do that many multi-division projects. This is one of those rare examples. And then I was constantly harping on my wonderful partners, because the Kennedy Center has been phenomenal in this as well, about the need for a resource center, a kind of a website or someplace that the general public and scientists also could go. And so that's when the NEA stepped up, and Sunil just really took this on and ran with it.
Oh, thanks. I was just going to offer that, having been invited by Dr. Collins to attend that January gathering in 2017, I was so impressed, I have to say, now that I can tell you both, with both Dr. Collins and Renee sitting through 2 days of solid, heavy-duty, hardcore scientific presentations. Perhaps Dr. Collins would, but he's a pretty busy man too. And Renee was asking all the right questions, I have to say, to the scientists and the people in the room. And I think the folks at the National Endowment for the Arts were just thrilled with the opportunity to partner this way. Deborah Rudder, the head of the Kennedy Center, also is a big part of this project, as is Ann Meyer-Baker, who's the music director at the National Endowment for the Arts. And so we all got together and particularly kind of riding alongside NIH and Renee and the Kennedy Center at first, and figuring out how can we create a big tent approach to bring all these different disciplines together. And who are these different groups? It's musicians, but it's also music therapists, neuroscientists, clinicians, health providers, and it's kind of a tall order to kind of get them all to communicate on the same platform. So I think that's where UCSF has really stepped in and is going to help us by creating this Sound Health Network we're talking about today.
Sunil, Renee brought up an interesting point, one that I had sort of thought about in preparation for this, and that is that she said when she first met Dr. Collins, why is the NIH studying music, essentially? What is the inflection point here? And I'm wondering, Sunil, was that a issue at all with the NEA? I mean, when you're making the case as Director of Research and Analysis that this makes sense, was there any pushback at all as thinking about the arts as this platform for science?
Not at all. Many people may know that the National Endowment for the Arts, the primary mission of the National Endowment for the Arts is to promote diverse opportunities for participating in the arts all across the country, communities large and small. But we also have a dual mission, which is to gather and collect and promote evidence about the value and impact of the arts for individuals and communities. And we'd love to do this ultimately, I think it's safe to say, for all art forms. The other thing I will say is that we have a history at the National Endowment for the Arts for supporting military and veteran populations, music therapy and creative arts therapies for those populations. So there was also that value as well.
Yeah, I mean, it is remarkable, and I'm glad you're supporting that kind of therapy. You can find these videos online of how music therapy works. I watched a lot of it in preparation for the story, and anybody can do this. You should watch it because it is remarkable to see how quickly music can act as a therapeutic. And I love the idea that we heard of the music explorers, and Dr. Charles Lim and Julian Johnson. They mentioned that in their welcome. These activities that bring in all these different people, scientists and educators and therapists and musicians, obviously, all these people coming together to try and be a part of this Sound Health Network, which is remarkable work. Renee, I was fascinated in your book, Inner Voice, in which you shared your story about dealing with crippling stage fright. Everyone's surprised when I say this because everyone has seen you perform, and did he just say stage fright? But you had crippling stage fright. That experience also was in part what led you to want to explore this connection between mind and body. Is that right?
Absolutely. And it really got me interested also in performance psychology. And the more I looked into it, the more I really felt that we are so much whole people when we're artists. And when we're moving through the world, you can't really separate out different parts of ourselves. And as a performer, particularly because we have to be in the zone to be good at what we do. And it's a flow state. It's a form of that. And if we're crippled by insecurities or the sense that we're being judged negatively all the time, you can't perform well. Which is why when I met Dr. Collins, I was there and ready with the right questions.
Sure were.
We're running out of time, unfortunately, because I'm really enjoying this conversation. But I do want to leave people with a little bit of a visual as we're sort of wrapping up here. Dr. Collins, after you would wrap up dinners in the Shenandoah Valley, this is when you were young, when you were a child, your family would sit around the living room and play instruments. And you'd even put on musicals. And I just imagine that, a young, later to be Dr. Francis Collins, head of the NIH, running around as a little kid, playing instruments with the rest of the family, putting on these musicals. It's just a great visual. And I love thinking about it. But I'm curious, you talked about how music helps you decompress during this very stressful time. How has music driven you otherwise in this remarkable work that you do as the chief scientist for our country?
Music has brought us together, probably for hundreds of thousands of years. It has probably kept us in community zones as opposed to fighting each other. Although there are fight songs, there's also a lot of songs about worship and prayer and grief and supporting each other, whether it's the Inn at Little Washington singing "The Times They Are A-Changing" to Supreme Court justices, or whether it's, as I had the chance with Renee, singing "Hard Times Come Again No More," and in the midst of the pandemic, a song that was written more than 150 years ago, but so fits the current circumstance. It brings something out in you that you didn't quite know was there. And if you're a scientist who's interested in human behavior and in neuroscience, but also a human being who wants to experience life fully, music gives you that opportunity that I have found very few other things can tap into. It's a gift.
It's a beautiful way to leave this session. I really do want to thank all of you for this incredible work that you're doing. I think there are going to be people who are interested in this field, who are just young scientists right now because of the tone that you've set and the importance that you've given this. So I can't wait to see what comes out of this new network. I also hope that we can get together in person soon. I am told that Dr. Collins often brings his guitar and entices a song from Renee. So that would be amazing. I'm going to be an optimist. I'll bring along my accordion. I don't know if that's adding any value. And maybe Sunil and I would even do a little Bollywood dance.
There we go.
We'll see. We'll see.
Okay, we're going to hold you to that.
Got it. Just to see you guys in person would be magical. But thank you very much. Really
you
wonderful
very
to be
much.
with you
Thank
today.
you.
Thanks, Sanjay. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Sanjay. Now that you've heard how the Sound Health Network came to be, I'm thrilled to share with you where we're headed. Our goal is to build a multidisciplinary network of researchers, music therapists, musicians, music organizations, educators, and others, all working at the intersection of music and health. A wide variety of initiatives, tools, and resources can be found on our brand new website, soundhealth.ucsf.edu. There, you can read about our mission and vision, learn about our team and partners, and catch up on news and events. You can also find out more about the research projects that are currently funded by the NIH and NEA. And we hope the website will become a go-to resource for you. In order to make it easier for you to find research related to music and health, we've created a clearinghouse, a searchable database of publications. This clearinghouse will be regularly updated as it continues to grow and will seek your suggestions and additions on our website. You'll also find ways to discover each other with our connector tools. In addition to a roster of those working at the intersection of music and health, you'll find affinity groups to explore common interests and maybe even collaborators for future research projects. Students will be able to connect with one another as well as with leading researchers and music practitioners. Finally, the Sound Health Network is proud to announce a series of events and gatherings to bring us all together. First up, our monthly webinar series, starting February 24th, is designed to facilitate dialogue among multiple disciplines by pairing discussants from different fields to share their common interests in music and health. More technical conversations related to each webinar will occur in our virtual journal club. Think about this as a book club for scientific articles. And like everyone, we look forward to being able to gather again during future annual convenings to meet and share with one another virtually or in person. As you can see, we're offering many exciting ways to get to know each other's work and connect. Please get in touch with us by visiting soundhealth.ucsf.edu. With your participation, the Sound Health Network will become a lasting resource. Thank you very much and enjoy the rest of the program.
The key to making the Sound Health Network a dynamic community is collaboration. And every real collaboration begins with dialogue. Our next segment features a heart-to-heart between music and science. Grammy-winning musician Esperanza Spalding speaks with the Sound Health Network's own Charles Lim, chief surgeon and hearing specialist at UC San Francisco, whose passion as a musician fuels his research on how musical creativity operates in the brain. Watch this fascinating conversation.
Esperanza, it's so good to see you again virtually. I'm really sorry that we can't meet in person during this madness.
Yeah.
You know, it's been a long time since we were able to see each other or hear any live music. How have you been doing with all this?
I mean, the bulk of the work that I do is work that's done alone, you know, prepping and studying and practicing and writing and editing and devising. I definitely get the sense that we're going to move into a time where we really, really appreciate the medicine of being together and sharing the real-time vibrations of musical performance. So what about you?
I sure hope that happens. You know, for me,
Yeah.
I'm in this other situation where the hospital right now is a reminder of, I think, how lucky I am to be healthy and to be able to help somebody who is not healthy. It's been gratifying. You know, I don't think I ever told you this when we first met at the Kennedy Center, but my parents were both surgeons, but as a result, I didn't want to go into medicine. I actually intentionally did not want to go into medicine. I was always thinking about music and how I could have a life that was somehow musical, even though I didn't have the conviction to be a musician. And then it was actually when I was in the OR watching open heart surgery as a volunteer, and I saw this, you know, literally looking at this person's heart beating in front of me, and I realized that there was a direct relationship between the physical nature of the body and that patient's ability to have joy, love, happiness, all of the things that made life worth living. And so for me, all of a sudden, there was this link between all the things I got in music and what I was seeing in the hospital. And then it suddenly felt okay for me to pursue a career in medicine.
It makes me think about maybe our expectations that we bring to music practitioners of wanting to see a kind of like parallel expression of seriousness. And when you were speaking about the heart being open and recognizing this physical tool that facilitates like the real grand adventure of being, which is based in experiencing life and beauty and love, I think about the role of the music practitioner in so many ways is to bring forth and translate and present that beauty. Similarly, I'm curious about the therapeutic effects of music, right? Because we've spoken about this. Something is going on. There's a lot of things going on that have been measured at different dimensions. We want to know how to work with those to enhance the potential for the music to do it. And it feels like whatever's really going on is like just past what we can see, which is kind of terrifying and amazing. And I think part of what makes this like point that we're both standing at so exhilarating, you know, because we're like truly peering into mystery and see what we can draw from these, you know, paths of expertise to like illuminate part of the mystery so we can use it to help people, right?
Then somewhere along the way, you're talking about thinking that music should always feel good and how it did. But then there became this concept of responsibility that's in there. They're merged together. Where did that come out? I can tell you how it came up for me, but I think it's very different.
Please.
Well, an artist is, at the beginning, it's an exploration of oneself in a very profound way, and giving the insights that you gain from that exploration back to the world. But medicine is not really that way. In fact, it's actually the opposite. You're trying to almost take yourself out of the equation. So let me give you an example. Let's take an emergency situation in surgery. Somebody is bleeding, somebody is not doing well, patient is crashing. Actually, the last thing you want to do in that situation is be emotional. You need to recognize that there's an emotional significance to the possible stakes of what happens. Yes, that has to be a foundational given. But your job at that moment is not to feel, it's actually to think your way to help this person that needs your help. And so the responsibility is very immediate there. So I never felt like I had a home in medicine until I found the field of otolaryngology and specifically otology, because it's all about the ear and hearing. In fact, one day, Esperanza, you need to join me in the operating room, because when you look at the eardrum and you look at how small the hearing bones are, sometimes we remove the stapes, which is the third ossicle. It's the most, really the most important hearing bone.
One of my favorite words, by the way. I just think that's an amazing word, ossicle. But
Well,
back
when
to
you
you.
hold it in the palm of your hand and it's so small, and you realize, wow, that is how that person has heard all the sound they've heard on that ear for their whole life, makes you really see the linkages between this sort of physical reality and this deeper experience. And so the responsibility I always have is that people show up from day one basically saying that they can't do this, they can't hear music, they can't enjoy the benefits of the auditory world. And I immediately wanted to try to set out and figure out how to solve it.
Wow, that's really deep to think about, that responsibility in your field as a practitioner being grounded in a certain way, the removal of the self. We know that it's very, very difficult, if not impossible, to get the full sort of objective biological benefit of music therapies without the subjective perspective of the listener and the music maker.
When you raise this concept of music as medicine, you once told me how you have had the experience many times where as you're playing for an audience, you can tell that there's an impact on that audience. How meaningful is that to you as an artist?
It makes me think about a phrase that I read in this study out of Holland that was using music therapy as an intervention for employees who had to take sick leave because of work-related stress. We can't really tell how much of this study is about the potency of the music and the way that the music intervention is working, and how much of it is about the clients, the patients, feeling cared for. Feeling cared for by that music therapist. And that really hit, that really struck. And what it implied to me is that these researchers who are trying to look at this intervention objectively perceived a sort of correlation between the experience of receiving music and engaging with music and feeling cared for. They questioned whether or not the felt sense in the body of being cared for is what actually triggered or supported the shift in their mental state that allowed them to go back to work. Surely there's some analysis of what that is chemically in the brain, the sense of being cared for, even down to that. And maybe that's one of the ways that you're alluding to, that the artists and the scientists can kind of invite the other to stretch past the boundaries of what they do and how they do it, It might be an invitation to ask the scientists, actually bring your whole subjective self onto the other side of this veil, because that's the only way you're going to be able to perceive the truth in this space.
You just articulated perfectly the whole point of, I think, the Sound Health Network and also the difficulties that we face. It's really about this melding of cultures that are different. And, to me, this subjective-objective tension is a great example of the things that we need to figure out how to grapple with. These are the dilemmas, right? So scientists generally don't want subjectivity to be a part of the discussion. What I want is, exactly as you said, for scientists to join hands with musicians and say, okay, what do you know that I need to know to really understand this? And how can I make a better experiment? How can I write an analysis that you'll actually care to read about, so that in the end, my work is relevant for what you do and your music is relevant for how I approach it?
Science and music have always been in conversation. I mean, there's a science to what a luthier does. There's an objective methodology to what a luthier does. Part of what lights this up as such a fantastical and new and exciting path is because we're talking about the science of the body, which, as mechanical as it is in so many ways, carries within it so many mysteries that are way beyond even the most advanced medical doctor or brain surgeon. You know, it's like rife with mystery. Science is still evolving. Music is still progressing. And it seems like whatever that river is of continuation of the human spirit of inquiry, it's really not contingent on us being right or even doing it well. It's just that we came with sincerity.
Well, you're such a joy to listen to. You know, I sometimes don't even want to participate in a conversation because I just want you to be the one talking.
Charles,
I'll tell you
come
this
on now.
though, 1,000 years from now, people will still be listening to your music. And
Oh, Charles.
oh, they will be. And you know what they will think? They will think that my world got better when they heard it.
Oh,
And so
that
if
is a very sweet thing to say.
I fully believe it. I'm so grateful and just looking forward to the chance to continue speaking with you about this.
Well, if I'm still alive in 1,000 years, I will definitely need some support on my hearing faculty. So I'm gonna be reaching out to your, 992-year-old self and being like, yo, can you hook up this hearing?
Yes.
One of my obstacles is loose in there.
I got it. I'll take care of it. I'd really like to thank Esperanza Spalding for joining us once again here with the Sound Health Network. And as always, your participation and your insights and your musicianship and your wisdom is always so valuable. And I learn, I think, a lifetime's worth of information and insights every time I talk to you. And so I'm very glad to have you here. And I really look forward to what we'll do next. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Charles. Thank you for inviting me into this space. It's really a privilege, and I learn a lot. I learn a lot in conversation with you. Thank you.
Our next duo investigates how making music with others affects not only our development at every stage of life, but also the well-being and health of entire communities. Chicano rock guitarist Quetzal Flores has a creative approach rooted in social activism. He talks with cognitive neuroscientist John Everson, professor at UC San Diego, who studies rhythm and perception, as well as the effect of music training on childhood development. Let's start with a peek at Quetzal's work in East Los Angeles and Seattle, showcasing a devised practice he calls community songwriting.
ACTA, being a traditional arts organization, is charged with implementing and integrating and interfacing traditional arts and cultures into the broad scope of what community health looks like. One of the tools that we've been accessing as a resource in the community is collective songwriting.
Collective songwriting really brings the community in to do the work of music. It really brings them in to engage in that process. And by having them be a part of that process gives them a sense of ownership to the ideas, to the discussions that are taking place while they're creating music, as a way of articulating something beyond what's written on paper. Music allows them to create for themselves.
It's a recycling world. Everybody sing that for me, please. Nice and loud. Da, da. I'm recycling my bad ways to make some better days. It's a recycling world. Again, nice.
Lace up my shoes when I'm in the game. You can't shine like me, cause everybody's not the same. My dreams is like never ending rain. If you took a couple steps in my shoes, you will feel my pain. Life full of crime, a lot of things in my mind. Teen life's getting took, so I'm trying to refrain. The dirty south is a place from where I came. Trying to make a living, can't hold chump change. Cops killing off African Americans. It's a cold world that we living in. Can't take it, so you know I find different ways to claim life. So I gotta get it in.
The We've had workshops on DACA DAPA and deferred action. We've had workshops on the local control funding formula. We've had workshops on Boyle Heights for youth and youth advocacy in general. My hope for this in the end is that there is a healthy ongoing dialogue between community organizers, community organizations, nonprofit organizations, and artists, where these cultural convening methods are then implemented on a deeper level so that the everyday practice of a community involves art and culture.
So that video was fantastic. It's very, very inspiring to see the work you're doing to really help people realize their dreams and ambitions through music. It's interesting, but I think we have a lot in common. I think what we're doing scientifically is really aiming to do the same thing, using music to help kids grow up to be the best that they can. I'm really curious to know what kinds of methods you use to try to get people to express their deepest feelings through music, because we all know that not everyone is comfortable with music. So I'm just curious how you open up a group like that.
Like you said, we do have so much in common, and a lot of what we're thinking about when we enter into a space like that is behavior, right? Conditions. We are entering with an understanding of who's at the table and knowing how to arrive in an informed, cohesive, and respectful manner that can lend itself to quickly building trust, initiating a relationship that doesn't end with the song, the creation of the song, but that continues on through the work that is being discussed, through the process, this open-ended process.
It's beautiful, really beautiful. We think a lot about why are humans musical in the first place, and I think you really hit on one of the most compelling ideas, is that music is a mechanism for building groups. It is a mechanism for bringing people together. It's part of being human. It's part of our species. Music has been a part of education since the time of the ancients. Confucius, Socrates, all spoke about how music is a way to cultivate not just the mind, but the soul, the heart. Is there something that you find that music has a certain power to unlock?
Absolutely, and I think it goes beyond simply music. I think it's important for us to enter into a conversation around culture and cultural, not just cultural relevance, but cultural sustainability. When we were in the space with the Latino community, and mostly parents who are talking about schools and how their children are engaging in schools and how they want to be a part of that engagement, you notice it was a cumbia. The rhythm was a cumbia, right, or a Mexican cumbia. And so that was by design. That was because within the process of engaging in the conversation, we asked about what they wanted to hear, what they felt, what moved them. And so I want to turn this around and actually ask you a question, because I think about the term finding your voice, right? And this can go for, in a space like this, you often see someone who may be quiet, who suddenly asks a question or makes a comment, a one-word comment based on the conversation. And so finding voice, what is happening? What is happening neurologically when someone is projecting a vibration from their mouth, from their cavity? And even further, what happens when you multiply that by community?
That's a fantastic question. I'll be totally honest and say I don't know. We don't know yet exactly how that works. But there's definitely something to do with what we call, metacognition, which is like thinking about thinking. It's about how you view yourself. And something about music and about singing is very direct, unmitigated, unmediated kind of form of communication. It's not going through the part of the brain that puts sentences together and checks if things are true or false and things like that. And I really wonder if, kind of making that transition from being inward and self-controlled to being more spontaneous, if there's some way in which music kind of facilitates that transition in a way that other kinds of inputs might not.
I'm just thinking about tradition, and I have a friend who used to work at University of Washington, and he studied birds and bird songs. And he told me that there are birds that for generations sing the same song, and they pass on their songs, right? I made tamales this holiday. That is a tradition that spans thousands and thousands of years. How did it land in my hands, and why did it land in my hands, and what is my responsibility in this to continue this tradition? And so then this goes to the idea of research, okay? How do we decolonize research? How do we engage research methods with a critique on white supremacy, capitalism, and patriarchy to arrive at a more cooperative way of engaging? And it's probably not called research because that has a very specific meaning, so that someone would not even think about entering into a space to extract information, but in fact is entering into a space understanding that they have an obligation for life to that community or that person or that group of people.
There's a lot there that we can talk about for hours, I think. First off, I mean, you're asking about how can we, decolonize research? How can we turn research? I would say, I think you have given the answer already, which is community, which is, in my way of thinking, it's a kind of a lateral sharing. It's recognizing that each person, each group has their own perspectives. But what we're doing, for example, in our current project, which is called the Early Project up in Vista School District in San Diego County, we're testing the idea that giving kids, pre-kindergarten, kindergarten kids, group singing lessons will help them in school, help them learning language, help them with all of their schoolwork. And so there's been a tradition in scientific research saying, well, music can be good for math, good for language. And there's some evidence for that as well. But one really interesting thing we found with my colleagues at UCSD is that our music measures actually seem like they are separate from those more traditional academic measures. We can look at a child who's actually not doing too well at the standardized language tests, standardized math tests, but they're off the charts in terms of singing, in terms of, say, how well they can imitate a tune, how well they can carry a melody, how accurate they are. That's really opened our eyes to the possibility that we can use music as kind of a way to reach kids who might be struggling in other subjects but are excelling in music. And so to take that in a broader picture, coming back to your question, it's important to recognize, what each person is bringing, in our case, to the educational experience, to the classroom, and meet them there. Our long-term dream is not, scientists doing science, educators doing education, artists doing art. It's really all three of those groups working together to create something that goes beyond any one of those labels, right? It takes time. There's a lot of translation, a lot of languages that are different have to be learned from each other. So it takes, years even. But that's really our mission, I think, is to do science in a way that is, co-creating with the community so that we can actually be asking questions that they're interested in the answers to.
So going back to collective songwriting, when we enter into a space, the conversation has to start with reframing the criteria, right? What does success look like in this context of collective songwriting? And so we have to focus on the politics of participation and a criteria of participation, right? And so this space is successful when you are able to participate deeply, right?
Yeah.
Your success is measured by your depth of participation.
You actually started answering one of the questions I did have, which was how do you define success, or how do you define an outcome in your collective songwriting? Do you have an opportunity to, follow up with them to see how things are going, to create, like you said, a new way of relating, a new way of discussing, a new way of thinking?
Going back to those birds, and the birds through generations singing the same songs, such is community. Like, so in order for us to be well, we have to be able to sing songs of wellness. We have to be able to affirm each other's songs, being whether they're different or the same, and learn from each other's songs.
Well, really well said. Yeah, it's really so true.
All right, John, what are we doing? What are we doing here? What are we doing together?
I mean, definitely what we've got to do is just get together and make some music together. I mean, that seems like the most obvious first place to start, right? If it was possible for us to like step into each other's world for a bit, and I would love to have you come down and see what we do in schools and see how we interact with kids and look at data together, right? And see what kind of, inspiring questions looking at this data might bring up in you that we might not have thought of. Maybe by the same token, I could come to one of your workshops and just be a fly on the wall or something more. That seems like the most obvious and fun place to start. What do you think?
I'm down.
Yeah, great.
I am
that's
down.
Awesome.
That sounds about right.
Yeah, let's just get rid of this virus first, and then we can really.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Quetzal. This has been a wonderful conversation. I think it's helped me see what I do in a slightly different light. I feel like I've learned a lot, and I look forward to continuing and getting together and make some music sometime.
And I'm very curious about a lot of things. I have so many more questions, and I'm looking forward to playing some music with you.
Sounds great. Thanks a lot, Quetzal. Stay well.
You too.
Hello, I'm Indre Viscontis. I'm a neuroscientist and an opera singer turned director. I'm also the Communications Core lead at the Sound Health Network, and it's my job to share the stories of people whose lives have been changed by music. The conversations we've been hearing are an excellent introduction into the kind of work we hope to facilitate here at the Sound Health Network. Open and honest discussions leading to new collaborations that will further our investigation into music and health. Quetzal and John also talked about how essential listening is as we start to work together across disciplines. And that's exactly why I'm here. Researchers and therapists who choose this field do so because the power of music to heal is still, as Oliver Sacks has written, one of the great mysteries of science. Over the past few years, I've shared the stories of many people about how music has made them better, from teenage moms bonding with their unexpected babies who upended their lives by singing lullabies, to the Parkinson's patient who never took a dance class in his life and now it's the best part of his week, from kids who are comforted by music during painful medical procedures, to incarcerated individuals giving voice to their stories by writing music themselves. To hear more of these stories and to tell us yours, sign up for our newsletter on our website and reach out to us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at SoundHealthNet. Our next guests, Dr. Sherry Robb of Indiana University and Dr. Emmeline Edwards from the NIH, are joined by Jeffrey Franks, a mother and music therapy advocate, to share how one of Sherry's research studies led to a lasting connection, and also to discuss just how the NIH looks to support new music-based interventions. Thanks for being here with us. And now, over to Sherry.
Hi, and welcome. We're so glad to have you here for the Sound Health Network launch event. My name's Sherry Robb, and I'm a professor, a music therapist, and an applied research scientist on faculty at the Indiana University School of Nursing. I am so pleased to be joined today by my good friend, Jeffrey Franks, and Dr. Emmeline Edwards, who is the Director of Extramural Research Division for the National Center for Complementary and Integrative Health at the National Institutes of Health. To start off today, Jeffrey, you and I met almost 17 years ago, maybe more. And it was when I was first starting to research an intervention that uses songwriting and video production. So can you take us through how we met?
Yes, Sherry, I would love to. And I'm thinking it's amazingly about 21 years ago, actually. We were in the hospital because our daughter Heather had been diagnosed with cancer. And we were approached by you and your colleagues about the possibility of Heather being a part of your research study. And that meant that she had the opportunity to make a music video to kind of set the scene When your child is diagnosed with a life-threatening illness, it can feel like your life has become narrowed down to being on a 24-hour pager to that disease. And when that disease makes a demand, you have to respond in the best way that you can. And when she was given the opportunity to do the music video, I watched some really beautiful things happen. I saw her totally engaged in the project, so much so that my husband and I could actually leave the room and maybe go get a cup of coffee. The thing I really noticed for my husband and I is that we could relax our hypervigilance, which is something that runs night and day. I also noticed that Heather was given a lot of choices by doing this music video. She was able to pick among 5 songs. She was able to remove all the wording and put in her own wording. She was able to take pictures. She was able to do drawings and create exactly what she wanted. She also could talk about anything she wanted, and she chose to talk about her cancer. She was able to talk about anger. She was able to talk about humor. She was able to talk about hope. And all of that was able to be discussed during the making of this music video.
So Jeffrey, in talking about this and describing Heather's experience with this music therapy project, it seems like she was really taking charge of some aspect of her care. What sort of tangible changes could you observe from her?
Oh, yes. I noticed her energy level coming up. I noticed a sense of purpose, and I noticed that she really enjoyed being in charge of this program. So I saw some happiness when that was hard to come by. I saw her kind of relax into this program. I noticed that in myself and in my husband as well.
So Sherry, can I ask you a question regarding the project itself? What kind of measures, what kind of outcome measures were you looking at in that population?
We were using a measurement model that is looking at resilience. So what are factors that help patients to be resilient in the face of a life-threatening illness? And so we had a lot of positive health outcomes. So we were looking at how can we use this intervention so that adolescents and young adults increase kind of their armory of ways to cope with that experience. And also quality of life outcomes and lower distress. Those are the types of outcomes that we were looking at.
That is one of the issues that we are addressing in the context of developing music-based interventions, because we want to make sure that the intervention is developed with the purpose of reaching a target, meaning addressing a particular mechanism. In your situation, you're talking about coping mechanisms and reducing stress, and also looking at the right measures to actually relate that particular target to the intervention. That allows me to talk a little bit about what we've been doing at the NIH. Sherry is one of the 15 investigators that were funded by the first funding opportunity announcement that we had in the context of music and health. And we are steadily growing that research community to allow us to develop larger scale study, because in the past, although quite a bit of work had been ongoing, the sample size of those studies were very small, and you really cannot generalize with such small studies. So the NIH is actively involved in providing funding to not only understand how music impacts the brain and other bodily systems, but also how music interventions can be utilized to provide healing for certain aspect of various disease.
I was just going to bring up too, I wanted to know if I could hear from Jeffrey a little bit more about, your thoughts on, a lot of what we're centered on with the Sound Health Network is really bringing different groups of people together to help advance research in music and health, public awareness about its benefits. That's all very much centered on those, patients, families, consumers. So I'd just be excited and interested to hear what are your thoughts about these new initiatives and the role of research from your perspective.
I would love to see more options for music therapy and more places in which music therapy can be an intervention and can be paid for. I am a real advocate for this, and I know that other countries are looking at broadening the scope of these kinds of interventions and paying for them. So I'm hoping that this grows and broadens and can be available for anyone.
Yeah, well, and research, public awareness, stories like yours, demand for services, those all really, I think, play an important role in growing music therapy as not only a service that's more broadly available, but also as a reimbursable service. So, Emmeline, from your perspective and in your role at the NIH, what do you see as important next steps in growing the availability of music therapy services?
Well, there are a couple of issues. The first one is really what we are currently trying to address is really to improve the quality of the studies. Without having a great evidence base, it's going to be very difficult to be able to bring those interventions to scale and being able to incorporate them into healthcare system. These are the issues that we're trying to address by providing funding to actually develop larger scale studies to give us the confidence that these interventions have some efficacy and also could be scaled. The second issue is an issue of workforce. We really need to have a broadening of the personnel that's needed for that kind of work. And that is why our approach is really to encourage a lot of interdisciplinary teams. So it really is a work that would require a number of disciplines to come together. And that's what we're trying to accomplish by those funding opportunities that we currently have available at the NIH.
Yeah, they are so critical. And I, as someone who's been working in the field for my entire career, it's really quite exciting. The funding is so important to the acceleration, but also it's been the visibility that the Sound Health initiative has brought to the importance of music for health. And I think now with the Sound Health Network, it's just an added layer of visibility, and it's giving us an opportunity to bring, much like we're doing today, voices of researchers, clinicians, consumers together. Jeffrey, your voice is so important.
The whole concept of engaging patients and their families as part of the team is really important. Investigators have gone on and really created those experimental designs that were fairly far away from real-world experiences.
Well, thank you both for saying that. And as Heather's mother, and having gone through that experience and being a consumer of music therapy, I want to thank Sherry and her team for giving that to us and letting us be a part of it. And I appreciate being able to use my voice in this way.
Well, thank you.
Just want to thank everybody for being here with us today, and special thanks to Jeffrey and Emmeline for a wonderful conversation. If you enjoyed today's conversation, we hope that you will join us for the first Sound Health Network webinar in February, where Jeffrey will be back with me, but we'll be joined by Dr. Stephen Holocaust, where we'll be talking about research focused on symptom management and the use of music to help manage those symptoms. We really look forward to what comes next.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to participate into this conversation.
There are so many undeniable points of intersection between music, science, research, therapy, and the human brain. Exploring these connections, we hope to better understand the miracle of who we are and spark discoveries that will improve health and well-being. There's real work to do to make music an essential part of our health and wellness toolkit, and the time for this work is now. The success of the Sound Health Network depends on your participation, so please visit us at soundhealth.ucsf.edu to get involved. And finally, I want to say a special thanks to our partners, starting with Dr. Francis Collins at the NIH, as well as the NEA's Sunil Iyengar and Marianne Carter, who as chairman helped to make the Sound Health Network possible. To Charles Lim and Julene Johnson, and to all the participants in today's program, thank you for lending your voices to this cause. We hope the conversations have inspired you. They've been edited and condensed for today's program, but you'll be able to watch them in their entirety on the Sound Health Network website. And thanks to all of you for watching. Take care, stay healthy, and when you hear music, listen. And remember that we have only just begun to understand its power.